Hello everyone and welcome to Juan Between the Pages. My name is Juan and today it's finally time for the July wrap-up. My life is basically a mess. I'm moving out. I have a lot of things to do, but I wanted to take my time and make this video for you guys and talk about every single book I read this month so far. And I think that's it because I don't think I'm going to read new books because there's a couple of days left and I have a lot of things to do. So yeah, this is it. So in July I have read 6 books in total. I know that it's a little bit less than what happened in June, but I had more time back then. But I think it's a good number. I think that I'm expecting to read between 4 and 6 books per month from now onwards. So yeah, I'm really happy with the results. About the books that I have read, you will know like pretty soon what I think about them. But before starting, hello, I'm Juan. Thank you so much for joining me. Please consider subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and tell me down below which was your favorite book of this month. Have you read anything? Or what's your favorite series too? That counts too. I think that most people prefer watching series rather than reading books, but let's talk about books. But I would love to discuss about series too if you want. Movies too, since I'm a huge Marvel fan as well. But yeah, that's a topic for another video. I'm actually considering on making a video about the comics I read this year so far, so tell me down below if you're interested in that. So without further ado, let's get started with today's video. Come on, turn a little faster. So first up we have A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, or ACOTAR. I have talked a lot about this book. I have a video that I am basically just talking about this book, and I also mentioned this book in my ranking of mid-year ranking. So I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but you know that this was not my favorite like at all. I think this one was my least favorite book of 2022 so far. And actually it was, because in my ranking it was like last. So yeah, I'm going to give A Court of Thorns and Roses 2 stars out of 5, but go watch those videos if you want a further explanation why I didn't like this book. I don't want to talk about fairies any longer. Like, no, this was enough for me. Okay, next up we have I Kiss Sharewheeler. I adore this book. This book was amazing. I think that Casey McQuiston has this way of writing that every single book I've read from them, it's very cinematic. You can imagine all the scenes and the characters are so well fleshed out that I think that every single book is always a delight to read. I'm so happy that I have given it a go this month. If you don't know much about the story follows Chloe. She's like a raging bisexual and I love her so much. She's very chaotic. And this schoolmate of hers, Sharewheeler, is missing, and she left a letter to her and to her boyfriend and to her neighbor. And now these 3 characters have to look for her and following the clues. And it's very interesting, not only to know what happened to Sharewheeler and why these characters are chosen by her to look for her, but also to see how they develop. And there's a lot of huge and really wholesome LGBTQ stories here, and I think that its representation is amazing across the board. And I think this one is one of my favorite LGBTQ YA books I have read. So yeah, it's a total hit for me. If you want to know more about Casey McQuiston and this book, you should watch my Casey McQuiston video. So I'm just going to say that I gave I Kiss Sharewheeler 4.5 stars out of 5. Next up we have Radio Silence. This is a book I haven't talked about in my ranking because I just finished it. I think that this book was pretty cute. I think this book was very interesting. I think that compared to Solitaire, this one was way better, not only regarding its style, but also I found it more interesting in a way. I think that the way it talks about academia and how someone doesn't need to follow like a career to be successful and to be a fulfilled human being. And I think this discussion is really well developed throughout the story. I think the characters were compelling. I think that there's a tendency in every single Alice Oseman story that the characters are so like depressed and so low that sometimes it's a little bit triggering to read about this and to see a lot of very difficult situations they have to handle being teenagers. Also a common pattern between these two Alice Oseman stories, talking about Radio Silence and Solitaire, there's always a mystery in which you need to know who this character is. In the case of Solitaire, who Solitaire is, the owner of the blog, and then Radio Silence, we have not only the creator, but also we have this character February Friday, I think was his name, which is a character in the Radio Silence podcast, which is called Universe City, and it's very about sci-fi, but it's more like life meets fantasy. But coming back to the previous topic, I think that Alice Oseman isn't the best author when it comes to mysteries. I found them really predictable, not only in Solitaire but also in Radio Silence, and I wasn't as interested in knowing like their identities, because I was like, yeah, it's this character, like it's pretty obvious that this is the case. Even though Radio Silence tries to be misleading about the identity of February Friday, I think that in the end it wasn't as shocking as I was expecting it to be. However, you can see how Alice Oseman's style matured from Solitaire, and I think this story is more successful as a whole, even though it's still not my cup of tea. It's like, it's fine, it's better than Solitaire for me, but it's not like this huge book that blew my mind. Maybe if I have read this book when I was younger, maybe it was more effective. Before finishing this review, I'm going to say that I love how the whole Alice Oseman universe is connected. There's a lot of cute cameos, even though they're not named. You can see Charlie and Nick making a cameo, you can see Michael from Solitaire and also Tori Spring, and also they mentioned the schools and some events that happen in Heartstopper or in Solitaire. Also, regarding that, you should read first Solitaire and then write Radio Silence, because the first page of Radio Silence is a spoiler on how Solitaire ends, so be careful of that. So overall, I'm going to give Radio Silence 3.5 stars out of 5. It was better than Solitaire, but still didn't make it for me in the way I was expecting it to do. I'm going just to sit like this. Yeah, way better. Hello! Okay, next we have The House in the Cerulean Sea. This is exactly my cup of tea. This was my favorite book of 2022, and I think this is one of my favorite books of all times. I think this book is wholesome, it's cute, it's charming, it's queer, it's cozy, it's everything I love in a book, and I think that the themes of this story are so well developed. I think that every single character had a purpose, and they were so well rounded, and they have personalities, and I think that this worked for me so well, and I was so in love with this story that I started to recommend this book to every single person I was talking to at the moment. Stop immediately what you're doing and start reading The House on the Cerulean Sea. Period. The story follows Linus. He's a 40-year-old man who works for this huge magic department in the government, who has to inspect these different orphanages that have children with magical powers. But one day he was assigned to this job in which he has to go to this house in the Cerulean Sea, where there's this mysterious man named Arthur Parnassus, that he's like the director or the head of this orphanage. And he has a group of very dangerous children living with him. And during his stay in this house, Linus starts to think about the meaning of life and what gives him happiness. And I think that this book is so wonderful, telling his story, how he started to see his true colors, and how we should not judge a person by its cover. I know it's pretty basic concept, but this book works with it perfectly, especially when it comes to fantastic creatures, where people are really afraid of them, but in the end they're just children. Just go and give it a go. This book is amazing. Also, there's a loving LGBTQ storyline in here, so you will enjoy it like for sure. I'm going to give The House in the Cerulean Sea 5 stars out of 5, and I will definitely read more books from the author because this one is perfect. Next we have Book Lovers by Emily Henry. You know, at first when I was reading this book, I was a little bit concerned because I felt like I liked more beach read in the beginning when I was reading it. I think the halfway through I was like, this is not as good as I was expecting it to be. But then the second half of the book was perfect, and I think that I realized why the author took like those risks and made those choices. But then at the end, they all paid off. The story follows Nora. She's the shark. She works for an agency, a publishing agency, and she's always like fierce, and she's like very committed to her job, and she's always the person who got dumped by this man who left the city to a small town and fall in love with a girl in there. She's like this villainous character that is always not good for the man who needs to live a better life. And then we get to know her story a little bit more and how she becomes the protagonist of these stories and not like the antagonist. I think that my favorite thing about this book was not like the love story, like the romance aspect of it. I think it's deeper than that. I love the exploration of Nora as a character as a whole and how it discusses family, sisterhood, and all the duties that comes with having a responsibility as older sister, and also how difficult it is to balance your work life with your love life and family life as well. And I think that every single aspect of that are amazing and really well developed. And I think that at first I was concerned that Emily Henry was this kind of author that's always doing the same and the same and the same. But I think that this is not the case at all. Like every single book has their own identity. And I think this one it's pretty surprising. I really enjoyed reading Book Lovers, and I hope you too. At some point I'm going to make an Emily Henry video, as I did with Alice Oseman and Casey McQuiston, because I've read the 3 books and now I can talk more about them and compare them and to see which one is my favorite. But even though you may have an idea. Having said that, I'm going to give Book Lovers 4 stars out of 5. It was a solid read, and I recommend you guys to read it if you enjoy beach read and people will meet on vacation. And last but not least, we have boyfriend material. Oh my god. At first I was a little bit weird about this book. I wasn't sure if I wanted to read it because it looked like the Red, White and Royal Blue knockoff. And even though I can see similarities between those books, especially when it comes to the main characters' archetypes, but at the end it was its own thing, and I think I'm really in love with this story. The story follows Luke. He's a 29-year-old man who is son of a very like famous rock star from the 70s. And also his mother was also a rock star from the 70s. They are musicians, but now she's retired, but kind of retired, and he now is having a comeback after like a lot of excesses. He has never had a good relationship with his father, and he's always dealing with the consequences of being the son of a rock star, especially when it comes to paparazzi and news about him that are like very misleading when it comes to his personality. Even though he's very chaotic, he's very endearing as a character, but suddenly his public image falls apart because of this, and he's having a lot of troubles when it comes to meeting new people, and also his boss is about to fire him. So he needs to change this. He needs to show himself like he's growing up, he's maturing, and he's now like what he calls a good gay. I found that hilarious. And so a friend of his introduced him to Oliver. He's a barrister, he's a criminal lawyer, like me. But I don't like to talk about that, but I'm a criminal lawyer, yeah. And he's very like uptight and tidy and everything that Luke isn't. And they're like opposites, like 100%. So they start like this fake dating. And it's kind of a story of opposites attract, which I find really endearing. And I think that this book was exactly what I was expecting. It's like a rom-com, but it has like substance to it. The characters are interesting, mostly the two main characters, even though I found some of the side characters very endearing because they have their own personalities. Like there's a lot of characters with a lot of personality, which I enjoyed, but I wasn't as invested. I think this story only follows the two main characters, and that's it. I need to sit again. I was on my knees, so yeah. Even though I'm not a huge fan of this like fake dating trope, I think it's boring in a way, but I think in here it kind of worked. I was like, okay, let's move on, let's continue reading, see what happens. And I ended up liking it, the usage of it, even though it wasn't as convincing or appealing to me. I found this book so charming, so good. I cannot wait to read Husband Material, that is like the sequel to it, that is soon to be published, so I'm really excited about that. I'm for sure going to review it and make a video about it, but I don't want to talk a lot about the plot because I think this is an experience you should have by yourself. But having said that, since I didn't like much the fake dating thing, and I think that the end wasn't rushed, but I would wanted more, like maybe a couple of chapters to discover what happened afterwards, the ending. But overall, I'm going to give Boyfriend Material 4 stars out of 5. It was an amazing read. It was just right in my alley. It was gay and people in the late 20s. I'm 30, but you know what I mean. And this was all for today. This one was my July wrap-up. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and tell me which one of these books caught your eye and why. I really want to know. Thank you so much for being here, and I see you guys the next time. Bye bye.